Hey friends, Elizabeth here from Plant-Based Bride, back again with my first video of the new year, and I'm very excited to complete my book bracket spread in my reading journal with you all. This is one of my favorite videos to do every year, and in the past few years I've done it as my final video or one of the final videos that I post in the year at the end of December. But December was a whole mess this year. You might have noticed that I didn't post nearly as many videos as I normally do in December, so I'm doing it now in January, first video back. I hope you don't mind waiting just a little bit longer for this video. I hope it will be as fun and entertaining as it usually is. So without further ado, let's get in here. So for anyone who's unfamiliar with the book bracket, this is a spread that I created in my very first ever reading journal to help me determine my favorite book of the year, because I am very indecisive as a human and also as a reader. And I find it very, very difficult to pick just one favorite from an entire year of reading, especially when I read over 100 books in a year, as I did this past year and have for a couple years in a row. So how this spread works is a series of head-to-head battles of favorites until I get to the ultimate favorite. So I start by picking my favorite book from each month of reading. So there's 12 spaces along the top for my favorite from January all the way through to December. And then they go head to head, January and February, March and April. You get the gist. And I pick my favorite out of those two each time. And then in my second round, those favorites go head to head once again until I have my top 3 of the year. And that is usually by far the hardest decision I have to make through the entire process, to pick my absolute favorite, the reigning champion, if you will, of the year. So that is how this video is going to go. And I imagine this video will be no different from past years, which is to say that I will probably agonize and groan and be frustrated through this whole thing, because I just find it so hard to pick a favorite. So without further ado, I have preambled enough. Let's get started by going back to January of 2023 and picking my favorite. So I switched my digital reading tracker mid-year from a Google Sheet to Notion. So I have to pull up my Google Sheets for the first half of this year. And I actually technically have 2 separate Google Sheets because I messed up and started with the wrong version of the spreadsheet and had to start again. It's a whole thing. But anyway, so pulling up my spreadsheet here, in January, I read 4 5-star books: Amatka, Kaikei, The World We Make, and Legends and Lattes. And of those 4, Legends and Lattes is definitely my favorite, but it was a reread. I'd already read it before, and I'm pretty sure it was my pick for whatever month I read it in 2022. So I think it has to be eliminated. So looking at Amatka, Kaikei, and The World We Make, that is hard. I really like all 3 of those for very different reasons, but I think if I had to just pick one of those 3, it has to be Kaikei. So that's our first entry, Kaikei by Vaishnavi Patel, my favorite read of January. So I'm just gonna write Kaikei in here. All right, so we have Kaikei, winner for January. So moving on to February. In February, I had 5 5-star reads: Lessons in Chemistry, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, Gallant, Call Us What We Carry, and Whites. And, ooh, that's hard. We have a couple literary fiction, a poetry collection, YA fantasy, and an essay. So, oh, that's so hard. I think they're all so different. That's what makes it so hard. I hate comparing apples to oranges when it comes to books. They're all great for different reasons. This is my constant internal struggle. If I could only have one to take with me to a deserted island, I mean, honestly, I would if it was specifically a deserted island, I'd probably bring Call Us What We Carry, just because I feel like there's a lot in that collection about loneliness and isolation, because it's partially about the experience of the pandemic. But I'm taking this too literally. I think it would be Lessons in Chemistry. I think that's the one I would be most likely to want to reread out of those. And I think it's the one that's stuck with me the most out of those. So Lessons in Chemistry, I think, is going to be my favorite for February. So moving on to March, and I have to switch to another spreadsheet. And in March, I had 4 5-star reads: Hester, Shades of Grey, Monstrous Book 2, and Parable of the Sower. And once again, so many very different books. Hester is historical fiction about the woman who inspired the Scarlet Letter. Shades of Grey is a really absurd, comedic, sort of dystopian sci-fi kind of novel that I really loved. Monstrous is my favorite graphic novel series that I've ever read. Not that I've read that many, but I'm obsessed with it. I love the series. And Parable of the Sower was devastating and harrowing. It's sci-fi, climate crisis, sort of almost apocalyptic, very prescient, and very stressful. So, you know, once again, I'm struggling. Are we surprised? I think, as much as I really loved each of these, again, for totally different reasons, I think Parable of the Sower has to be my pick. I just feel like it's the one that affected me the most deeply. It was so intense, and we had such good discussions. It was our book club pick that month, and we just had so much to say, and it was so fascinating, and I just thought it was so, so good. I really need to read the sequel. I do own the sequel, so that is a plan. That's something I'm going to do in 2024 for sure. So Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler is my winner for March. Okay, moving on to April. I didn't read nearly as many books in April. It was a much slower reading month, so I only have one 5-star read, which was Taking Charge of Adult ADHD. So that's going to be my pick. It was my only 5-star read. So adding nonfiction to this spread. Moving on to May, and here I have 4 5-star reads. The Collected Regrets of Clover, Luster, Lost in the Moment and Found, and Entangled Life. So we have contemporary literary fiction, YA fantasy, and nonfiction. So a nice spread here. I really liked all of these books, obviously, that's why I gave them 5 stars, but 2 of them impacted me a lot more on a deep emotional level, and those were The Collected Regrets of Clover and Lost in the Moment and Found. Both of those made me cry like a little baby. The Collected Regrets of Clover, I have me on camera crying when I finished that book in a reading vlog. I'll link that for you in the description box if you want to watch it, but Lost in the Moment and Found was also profoundly moving. Oh, that's so hard. And then also, you know, Luster was amazing. I loved that book. Honestly, I'm almost tempted to pick Luster, even though it didn't make me cry the way the other 2 did, just because I feel like it had so much to say and it was so funny and ridiculous. And I loved the parallels between the main character's search for sort of coming into her own and trying to discover her own identity and figure out her place in the world, and using her artistic expression as a painter, as a metaphor for all the things she was going through. Oh, it's so hard. What am I gonna do? An Entangled Life. That was our book club pick for that month. It's nonfiction, all about fungi, and it was fantastic. It was really beautifully written, fascinating. I loved it. Honestly, I think I have to pick Luster. Luster was the most interesting to me on an intellectual level, and I really loved what it was doing as a book. And I think just in general, it's one of those books that has stuck with me the most that I've read this entire year, so I'd feel amiss leaving it off this spread. So I'm going to go with Luster, and Luster was written by Raven Leilani. Moving on to June, which is my last month that's included on this spreadsheet, we have 3 5-star reads. Monstrilio, Astrid Parker Doesn't Date, and 100 Years of Solitude. Once again, I'm here struggling because Monstrilio, fantastic literary horror. I have raved about it in multiple videos now at this point, in a live stream. I think it's great. Not enough people have read it. Astrid Parker Doesn't Date, one of my favorite contemporary romances that I've ever read. And then 100 Years of Solitude, which is a classic for a reason, and incredible, so well written, so many layers. That was another book club pick that we had such interesting discussions about. It brought up so many things for different people. We had so much to talk about in terms of history and culture and family, and it was just so great. So this is so hard. I'm definitely more so struggling with the choice between Monstrilio and 100 Years of Solitude, and it's really, really hard to pick just one of those. I don't know how. I really want both of them to be the pick. I kind of want, okay, this might be cheating, but I kind of want to replace Taking Charge of Adult ADHD with one of these 2 because they're both so fantastic that I can't imagine leaving either of them off this list. And Taking Charge of Adult ADHD is a great nonfiction book for adults with ADHD, of which I am one. But it just, you know, it was interesting. I learned a lot. It's given me a lot of jumping off points for developing more, you know, systems and coping mechanisms for my own life, but it hasn't been utterly life-changing. And part of that is my own fault, you know, having ADHD and not being super on top of following up on all the things in the book, which I'm sure you can relate to if you also have ADHD, or just tend to procrastinate, which many of us do. So I'm going to grab a little scrap that I have here for people who get worried that I waste paper when I make tabs and cut my pages. I keep every single piece of paper. Don't worry, I am drowning in tiny pieces of paper, and I keep them for times like this so I can make a little patch for this spread. So I'm going to do that after. For now, I'm just going to use a pencil, which I have right here. So I'm going to put Monstrilio in that spot. Mosquilio's gonna go there. And then I'm going to put 100 Years of Solitude in this spot. Moving on, I am now moving over to Notion because this is when I swapped to Notion to track my reading, which I do have a video in the works. I'm going to share a video showing you my entire Notion ecosystem for digital tracking of my reading. Don't you worry, it's in the works. I'm very excited to share it. I have, of course, overcomplicated it to an unnecessary degree, but hopefully it will be interesting and inspiring for any of you who want to use Notion to track your reading. I am really, really loving it for so many reasons, which I will save for that video because I don't need to spend all my time talking about that. Okay, I actually didn't give any 5-star ratings in July, so I'm looking at my 4-star reads and struggling. I think for now, I'm trying to learn from my past mistakes. I'm going to leave July blank right now because I don't feel super strongly about any of the options here as a favorite for that month. And if I have another month where I'm really struggling and don't want to pick one, I can fill it in there. And if I get to the end and I don't have that dilemma again, then I can go back to July and pick one. Let's go to August. And in August, I have 2 5-star reads, Monkey Beach and Wild Spaces. And once again, this is really hard. Monkey Beach was our book club pick for the month, and it is a bit of a mystery, sort of literary fiction by an Indigenous author in Canada about a young Indigenous woman whose brother has gone missing at sea. And I really loved that book. And then Wild Spaces is one of my favorite little subgenres. It's literary horror, and it has a young protagonist, which is not as common for me in this genre. And it's very weird and dreamlike and emotional, and honestly, I felt very deeply impacted by both of these books for different reasons. So, that's hard. Wild Spaces, Monkey Beach. Wild Spaces, Monkey Beach. Wild Spaces, Monkey Beach. Which one will I pick? I don't know. I think I have to pick Monkey Beach. I'm saying that like it's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all. They're both great, but I'm going to put Wild Spaces on hold. It might end up going in the July spot. But for now, Monkey Beach is my August pick. I highly recommend it. Okay, so moving to September, I have 4 5-star reads, Island of the Blue Dolphins, Ordinary Monsters, The Girl with All the Gifts, and Kai once again. So Kaikei's eliminated since it's already on the board, but we also have a sci-fi post-apocalyptic zombie story. The Girl with All the Gifts. I'm as surprised as you might be that I loved a zombie story so much that I gave it 5 stars. Ordinary Monsters, which is fantasy, and I read it in my Dark Academia video in September, which I'll link below if you missed it. And then Island of the Blue Dolphins, which is a childhood favorite that I reread and I still love and is very nostalgic for me. So, because Kai and Island of the Blue Dolphins were both rereads, I don't think it's really fair to include them here. So I'm looking at The Girl with All the Gifts and Ordinary Monsters, and that is a really hard choice because both of these have a young protagonist that I feel so fiercely protective over. I love them both for so many reasons. Marlo in Ordinary Monsters, and then Melanie in The Girl with All the Gifts. I didn't even realize till this moment that it's Melanie and Marlo. How sweet is that? Oh, how do I pick one? I really, really liked both of these. My gut is telling me to go with The Girl with All the Gifts, which, again, I'm a little shocked that a zombie book is getting on the board, but I really, really loved it. If you haven't read it, I would highly recommend, even if you're not normally a zombie, post-apocalyptic kind of reader, it's really a story about what makes us human and found family and love and belonging and starting over, and it's so beautiful. So, The Girl with All the Gifts, I think, is my choice here. And I'm gonna keep Ordinary Monsters sort of on standby, along with Wild Spaces. Moving on to October. In October, I read a lot of horror, and I read a lot of horror short stories. So I have more 5-star reads, and you can check out my Halloween horror reading vlog if you missed it to see my reviews of basically all of these. Yeah, all of these. These were all in that video. So we have The Fall of the House of Usher, Rouge, Carmilla, The White People, and A Whistle and I'll Come to You, My Lad. And once again, this is really hard. Which one is my favorite out of those? I don't know. Rouge is the only full-length novel out of this list. Carmilla is a novella, and then the other 3 are short stories that I read from a larger collection by the respective authors. I don't remember if I did a ranking in that video, but my pick now might be different from what I would have ranked as my favorite in that video, now that I have a couple months more time and I've let my thoughts on these percolate a little longer. I think immediately after I probably would have picked Rouge, but now that I've read another book, which probably won't even get on the board because I didn't actually give it 5 stars, that was Natural Beauty by Ling Huang, which I read in another horror reading vlog, which I'll link for you down below, reading the Goodreads horror nominees. That one, I didn't give 5 stars because there were some things that weren't quite there for me, although the more time that I spend thinking about it, the more I want to up it to 5 stars, so maybe I'll do that in this video, but I feel like it did a lot of what Rouge is doing, but I kind of liked the extra layers that were added into it a little bit more. So that makes me kind of not want to pick Rouge, even though I really loved it. It's great. I would highly recommend. I don't know. I do find it really hard to compare a short story to a novella or a full-length novel. Out of all of these, the one that has stuck with me the most in the last few months is probably The White People. Yeah, that was just, it was very strange, but very good. And I think it has to be my pick out of those, because like I said, it's really the one that has stuck with me the most. I feel like I will randomly get images in my head of, you know, the movie that played in my head while I read that short story. I sometimes get little flashes of it, like I just keep thinking about it in a way that I don't necessarily continue to think about all the others, although A Whistle and I'll Come to You, My Lad has definitely caused me to have a few scares. If you know, you know, but I'm not going to spoil it. So anyway. Oh, there were 2 more 5-star reads in October. The Boy on the Bridge, which is the sequel to The Girl with All the Gifts, and The Misanthrope by Molière, the play, which I feel like The Misanthrope is a very tight competition with The White People, because I also love The Misanthrope so much. But technically that's also a reread, although it was my first time reading it in French, but I read it in English in college, and I feel like my general rule of thumb so far has been leaving rereads off the list, so for that reason, I'm going to stick with The White People. Moving on to November, and in November, my 5 stars were The Reformatory, and that's it, unless I decide to up Natural Beauty's rating to 5 stars, which I've honestly been seriously considering now since I finished it, because I keep going back to it, and as much as there were a couple things that I felt could have been explained a little bit better, wrapped up a little bit better. Not that I need every answer, but just there were some things that didn't quite go anywhere that I found a bit frustrating. I still feel like it was such a great book and it stuck with me so much. And I keep thinking about it to the point where it's definitely a favorite. And I feel like it's unfair for me to only give it 4 stars. And I really was on the fence even then. I think I gave it 4.5 stars and I was really going back and forth. So I think I have to give it 5 stars. And as much as I love The Reformatory, and I do really love it, it made me cry so much and I thought it was fantastic. Like I said, I think Natural Beauty has stuck with me. It's one of those books that I read this year that has stuck with me the most. I found it so impactful. I thought it did so many different things very well and really wove together a lot of different thematic content in a way that was pretty seamless and also horrifying and fascinating and really engaging. So as much as The Reformatory is fantastic, and I actually might also add The Reformatory to my little possible additions list because it was really fantastic, I'm going to put Natural Beauty by Ling Huang as my favorite for November. And you can see me read it and review it in my horror category Goodreads nominees reading vlog, which I'll link below. And now we're on to the last month, and I'm already exhausted from all these decisions. In December, I had 2 5-star books, which were Sisters of the Lost Nation, which was another one of the horror nominees from Goodreads. I just didn't have time to finish it in that video, so I finished it in December. And then Minor Detail, which is a book that I decided to read based on the research I did into books written by Palestinian authors, which I shared on my Instagram. So if you're looking for a list of books by Palestinian authors to check out, I have that post over there. I can link it in the description box. And Minor Detail is the first one that I decided to read from that list, and it was heartbreaking and just devastating to read. And Sisters of the Lost Nation was also devastating in its own way. Both of them left me feeling just completely emotionally destroyed. I thought they were both really well done books. That is a really, really hard decision. And I don't know how to pick one. They do have a different tone. Sisters of the Lost Nation definitely has a bit of a thriller or horror structure to it. That's sort of the packaging, but it's very serious, very emotional, heartbreaking, really impactful. Minor Detail is presented in more of a literary way and has a historical fiction section. Oh gosh, that's so hard. I think I'm going to pick Minor Detail, but I'm going to add Sisters of the Lost Nation to my other books that I really loved and should be on this list. And honestly, I don't know how to pick out of these. I've just made this harder for myself because I have one extra space and I have to pick between The Reformatory, Wild Spaces, Sisters of the Lost Nation, and Ordinary Monsters. I think what I'm going to do is go back over this list and just think if any of the other ones on this list, kind of like I did with Taking Charge of ADHD, if any of these were, books that I really liked, but maybe don't deserve to be in my top 12 of the year. Because in the past, I've tried to be really strict about picking books from each specific month, even to the point of picking a book that wasn't a 5-star read. But I feel like I would rather have a more accurate representation of my favorite books of the year, even if there are a couple from one month and no representation for other months. So The Reformatory, Wild Spaces, Ordinary Monsters, and Sisters of the Lost Nation, all 4 are fantastic. I highly recommend them all. I recommend all of the books here, of course. They're my favorites of the year. But of these 4, The Reformatory and Sisters of the Lost Nation are definitely the 2 that have had the biggest impact on me, and definitely the 2 that I want to put on my spread. And I think just looking at this spread right now, the book that stands out to me that feels like it maybe doesn't quite belong, honestly, might be Lessons in Chemistry, which sucks because I really, really liked that book. I loved it, but I'm not sure that it has top 12 potential, So I think I'm going to replace Lessons in Chemistry with The Reformatory. And then I'm going to put Sisters of the Lost Nation in this space. So that is my updated list. I'm going to go away and make these look nice and pop them in here. And then we will continue on to the next round. Okay, so I have replaced our 2 options with my 2 standbys. So The Reformatory and Monstrilio are now here on the spread. So my top 12 favorite reads of 2023, we have Kaikei, The Reformatory, Parable of the Sower, Monstrilio, Luster, 100 Years of Solitude, Sisters of the Lost Nation, Monkey Beach, The Girl with All the Gifts, The White People, Natural Beauty, and Minor Detail. So time to do the head-to-heads, which are no easier, honestly, because there are fewer to choose from, but I feel more strongly about each individual book. So here we go. Starting with Kaikei versus The Reformatory, and the way I'm going to try to do this, honestly, is just try to go with my gut, and the first one that pops into my head is going to be the one I go with, I think, because otherwise we'll be here until 2025, and we don't have time for that. We're all busy. So I'm going to go with my gut instinct on each one. Kaikei and The Reformatory, I think my choice is going to be Kaikei. That's hard, but I think Kaikei is my choice. Okay, so we have first one done. All right, moving on to the next category. We have Parable of the Sower and Monstrilio. And for this one, I'm going with Monstrilio. Honestly, this is one of my favorite reads, not just of this year, but possibly of all time. It's so strange. It's so heart-wrenching. It's gorgeous. I'm obsessed with it. And that's all. That's it. If I convince even one person to read Monstrilio with this video, I will have achieved what I wanted. Okay, so Luster and 100 Years of Solitude. I'm going to pick 100 Years of Solitude, but Luster is very good, but 100 Years of Solitude is, I think, on just a whole other level. So here we go. Moving on to the next category, 2 pieces of Indigenous literature, both about missing people and a missing sibling, actually. I didn't even realize all those similarities when I at first plugged Sisters of the Lost Nation into there. So there's a lot of similarities going on there, which makes it harder, to be honest. This is hard. I really like both of them. I think I'm going to pick Monkey Beach, but this is a really hard decision. I think even more so because they are so similar and they're both 100% worth a read and fantastic books. Okay, next battle. We have The Girl with All the Gifts and The White People. And for this one, I think I'm going to go with The Girl with All the Gifts. It does have an advantage being a full-length novel over a short story, but I also just really loved this story. The thematic content, the characters, the relationships, it really touched me. So, The Girl with All the Gifts, a zombie story. Still so weird for me to say. Okay, and then our final head-to-head for this round is Natural Beauty versus Minor Detail, which honestly, that's... I love how I was just saying that this category was really hard because the books are so similar, but this one's really hard because the books are very different. They're exploring very different subject matter. The tones are just polar opposites. Oh, that's so hard. I think it's extra hard too because I read Natural Beauty a few months ago and it's really stuck with me. And Minor Detail is one of the last books I read in 2023, maybe the second last book I read or something like that. So it's much more recent and I haven't had as much time for it to really percolate and figure out how it kind of sticks with me. Whereas most of the other books here, I've at least had a full month to sit with them. Minor Detail, it's been about a week, I think, since I finished it. So I don't know how to pick. I think I'm going to go with Natural Beauty. Yeah, I think it's one of the books that, like I said, has really stuck with me the most out of all the books in the year, so it feels really weird for it not to move on to the next round. Minor Detail is a fantastic book, and I highly recommend it if you haven't read it, and definitely deserves its place in my top favorites of the year, but I would just feel weird not moving Natural Beauty onto the next round because it really does feel sort of representative of my year of reading in a lot of ways. So yeah, okay, I'm just gonna stop overthinking it and I'm just gonna go with it. So for the next round, my top 6 favorite reads of the year: Kaikei, Monstrillo, 100 Years of Solitude, Monkey Beach, The Girl with All the Gifts, and Natural Beauty. So moving on to the next round, our top 3 of the year. We're really getting down to the wire. So first head-to-head, we have Kaikei versus Monstrillo, and I'm picking Monstrillo. Going with my gut. I am a forever champion of this book and everyone should read it. And that's it. Our next head-to-head, 100 Years of Solitude versus Monkey Beach, and I have to go with 100 Years of Solitude. I feel good about that decision. Our final head-to-head for this round, The Girl with All the Gifts versus Natural Beauty, and I'm gonna go with Natural Beauty. Okay, so we have our top 3 books of the year: Monstrillo, 100 Years of Solitude, and Natural Beauty. 2 horror novels, 2 books that I would consider literary horror, and 1 literary fiction / classic of Latin American literature. This is very hard. As you might expect, we are now to the point where these are my top favorite books of the year. These are the books that I just absolutely loved, that really stuck with me, that I have so many feelings and thoughts about and could talk about for ages, and probably have already. So picking one favorite is so hard. And I truly, like, how do I pick just one of these? I don't know. I'm gonna start by trying to decide between Monstrillo and Natural Beauty because they're both what I would consider literary horror. I think it's a little bit easier to compare them on an even playing field because they do have a lot of similarities in terms of their genre and the tone and some of the thematic content, not all of it, but there's definitely some themes that are overlapping. Self-discovery in terms of your sexual orientation, transformation, a bit of a monstrous transformation element, family dynamics, and connections between parents and children. And as hard as this is, and as much as I love both of these so much, I think out of the 2, Monstrillo has to be my pick. This is so hard. But yes, okay, I'm gonna eliminate Natural Beauty. Monstrillo, I think, is my choice out of those 2, which means we're now down to Monstrillo versus 100 Years of Solitude to pick my absolute favorite of the year. And this is hard because they are quite different. There is the theme of family that is consistent with 100 Years of Solitude, and there are some similar themes in terms of family dynamics and sort of when to hold on to people and when to let go, and unhealthy attachment to family members, although that unhealthy attachment sort of looks different in both books. They're both beautifully written just gorgeous passages of writing that really blew me away. But you know, this might be controversial, but I think I have to go with Mostrillo. This is what I feel like this is wild that I'm picking a horror novel as my favorite of the year, but it is literary horror, okay? It's not it's not horror like you might think of horror. And it just I found it so touching and I love it so much and I just have a lot of feelings about it. So, Mostrillo I think has to be my pick. So I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to go with Mostrillo by Gerardo Semano Cordova. This was actually an ARC that I received from the publisher. I got an early ebook copy before it was published, and it's one of my favorite ARCs I've ever received. Just absolutely fantastic, and not enough people have read this book or are talking about it, and I would like to fix that. And that brings us to the end of this book bracket. We have my favorite book of the year, Mostrillo. Honestly, I feel great about that. I feel like it's very accurate considering how much I've raved about Mostrillo since I finished it. I feel like it's a good representative of the direction my year went in, especially because I started reading so much more horror, especially literary horror, as a means to explore a lot of different themes and some darker subject matter with more grittiness and a little bit more of an absurd, weird, strange quality, which you'll know at this point if you have watched my bookish videos. I love weird, strange, absurd, dreamlike, odd, unusual books, and I would say Mostrillo fits into that category well, while also having a lot of heart. So much great character development, relationships, lots of representation of different identities within the LGBTQIA+ community, just gorgeous poetic writing, and also some sort of creepy, monstrous qualities to it. And it's just so well done. So that is my favorite read of the year, Mostrillo. I feel great about that. I also feel really great about my top 3, my top 6, and my top 12. I feel like this is such a good representation of the books I read this year. So many great authors, and so many of these authors are completely new to me. 9, 10 of the 12 authors in my top 12 were new to me. The only authors that I'd read from before were Octavia E. Butler and Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Some of these are debut novels like Natural Beauty and Kaikei, but some of these I know for sure that the authors have written more work. But that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I know the book bracket has become a bit of a cult favorite for some of you, and I totally understand why. I love it too. I love making it. I love seeing your reactions to it, and I love using this as a tool to pick my favorite because otherwise I don't know how I ever would. For those who have been asking, yes, there will be a new reading journal set up for 2024. It's coming. Don't worry, it's in progress, and I will be including the book bracket spread yet again because it's become an absolute staple in my reading journal. Thanks for hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments what your favorite book of the year was. I would love to know. If I haven't read it yet, I will add it to my TBR because if it was your absolute favorite book of the entire year, it is probably worth reading. Thank you as always to my patrons for your support. I appreciate you all so much. If you are not part of the Patreon but you want to join us, you might be extra interested in our book club, which is where I read many of my favorites of the year, including Kaikei, Parable of the Sower, 100 Years of Solitude, and Monkey Beach. We pick some really great books. For the book club, we try to get a nice variety. We have the first couple books chosen for the book club this year. We're reading The Reading List this month, January, for our books and media prompt, and then February, our prompt was Dark Academia, so we're reading A Deadly Education. Then for March and April, we have our prompts picked. Those are translated fiction and historical fiction. So we're currently in the process of nominating books so that we can vote for our picks. So if you're interested in these books or in these prompts and you want to join us, feel free. The link is in the description box and you can help us vote to choose our March and April reads. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for hanging out with me for my first video back in 2024. I'm so excited for a whole new year full of videos for you, and I'll see you really soon in my next one. Bye, friends.